Hi, welcome back. We're reading the book of Genesis. Today we're doing chapters 41 through 45. These are the ongoing adventures of Joseph in Egypt. After a lapse of 2 years, Pharaoh had a dream. He saw himself standing by the Nile, when up out of the Nile came 7 cows, handsome and fat, and they grazed in the reed grass. Behind them, 7 other cows, ugly and gaunt, came up out of the Nile, and standing on the bank of the Nile beside the others, the ugly, gaunt cows ate up the 7 handsome, fat cows. And then Pharaoh woke up. He fell asleep again and had another dream. He saw 7 ears of grain, fat and healthy, growing on a single stalk. Behind them sprouted 7 ears of grain, thin, blasted by the east wind. And the 7 thin ears swallowed up the 7 fat, healthy ears. Then Pharaoh woke up to find it was only a dream. Next morning his spirit was agitated, so he summoned all the magicians and sages of Egypt and recounted his dream to them. But no one could interpret his dreams for him. Then the chief cupbearer spoke up and said to Pharaoh, "On this occasion I am reminded of my negligence. Once when Pharaoh was angry, he put me and the chief baker in custody in the house of the chief steward. Later we both had dreams on the same night, and each of our dreams had its own meaning. There was with us a Hebrew youth, a slave of the chief steward, and when we told him our dreams, he interpreted them for us and explained for each of us the meaning of his dream. And it turned out just as he had told us. I was restored to my post, but the other man was impaled." Pharaoh therefore had Joseph summoned, and they hurriedly brought him from the dungeon. After he shaved and changed his clothes, he came into Pharaoh's presence. Pharaoh then said to him, "I had certain dreams that no one can interpret, but I heard it said of you that the moment you are told a dream, you can interpret it." "It is not I," Joseph replied to Pharaoh, "but God who will give Pharaoh the right answer." Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "In my dream I was standing on the bank of the Nile, when up from the Nile came 7 cows, fat and well-formed. They grazed in the reed grass. Behind them came 7 other cows, scrawny, most ill-formed and gaunt. Never have I seen such ugly specimens as these in all the land of Egypt. The gaunt, ugly cows ate up the first 7 fat cows, but when they had consumed them, no one could tell that they had done so because they looked as ugly as before. Then I woke up. In another dream, I saw 7 ears of grain, fat and healthy, growing on a single stalk. Behind them sprouted 7 ears of grain, shriveled and thin and blasted by the east wind. And the 7 thin ears swallowed up the 7 healthy ears. I've spoken to the magicians, but none of them can give me an explanation." Joseph said to Pharaoh, "Both of Pharaoh's dreams have the same meaning. God has thus foretold to Pharaoh what he is about to do. The 7 healthy cows are 7 years, and the 7 healthy ears are 7 years, the same in each dream. So also the 7 thin, ugly cows that came up after them are 7 years, as are the 7 thin, wind-blasted ears. They are 7 years of famine. It is just as I told Pharaoh. God has revealed to Pharaoh what he is about to do. 7 years of great abundance are now coming throughout the land of Egypt, but these will be followed by 7 years of famine, when all the abundance in the land of Egypt will be forgotten. And when the famine has ravaged the land, no trace of the abundance will be found in the land because of the famine that follows it. So utterly severe will that famine be." That Pharaoh had the same dream twice means that the matter has been reaffirmed by God, and that God will soon bring it about. Therefore, let Pharaoh seek out a wise and discerning man and put him in charge of the land of Egypt. Pharaoh should also take action to appoint overseers, so as to regiment the land during the 7 years of abundance. They should husband all the food of the coming good years, collecting the grain under Pharaoh's authority to be stored in the towns for food. This food will serve as a reserve for the country against the 7 years of famine that are to follow in the land of Egypt, so that the land may not perish in the famine." This advice pleased Pharaoh and all his officials. "Could we find another like him?" Pharaoh asked his officials. "A man so endowed with the Spirit of God?" So Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Since God has made all this known to you, no one can be as wise and discerning as you are. You shall be in charge of my palace, and all my people shall dart at your command. Only in respect to the throne shall I outrank you." "Herewith," Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I place you in charge of the whole land of Egypt." With that, Pharaoh took off his signet ring and put it on Joseph's fingers. He had him dressed in robes of fine linen and put a gold chain about his neck. He then had him ride in the chariot of his vizier, and they shouted, "Abrek," before him. That was Joseph. Thus was Joseph installed over the whole land of Egypt. "I, Pharaoh, proclaim," he told Joseph, "that without your approval no one shall move hand or foot in all the land of Egypt." Pharaoh also bestowed the name of Zaphenath-Paneah on Joseph, and he gave him in marriage to Asenath, the daughter of Potiphera, priest of Heliopolis. Joseph was 30 years old when he entered the service of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. His name means the God speaks and he lives. The new child lives. After Joseph left Pharaoh's presence, he traveled throughout the land of Egypt during the 7 years of plenty, when the land produced abundant crops. He husbanded all the food of those years of plenty that the land of Egypt was enjoying, and stored it in the towns, placing in each town the crops of the fields around it. Joseph garnered grain in quantities like the sands of the sea, so vast that at last he stopped measuring it, for it was beyond measure. Before the famine years set in, Joseph became the father of 2 sons born to him by Asenath, daughter of Potiphera, priest of Heliopolis. He named his firstborn Manasseh, meaning God has made me forget entirely the sufferings I endured at the hands of my family. And the second he named Ephraim, meaning God has made me fruitful in the land of my affliction. When the 7 years of abundance enjoyed by the land of Egypt came to an end, the 7 years of famine set in, just as Joseph had predicted. Although there was famine in all the other countries, food was available throughout the land of Egypt. When hunger came to be felt throughout the land of Egypt, and the people cried to Pharaoh for bread, Pharaoh directed all the Egyptians to go to Joseph and do whatever he told them. When the famine had spread throughout the land, Joseph opened all the cities that had grain and rationed it to the Egyptians, since the famine had gripped the land of Egypt. In fact, all the world came to Joseph to obtain rations of grain, for famine had gripped the whole world. When Jacob learned that grain rations were available in Egypt, he said to his sons, "Why do you keep gaping at one another? I hear," he went on, "that rations of grain are available in Egypt. Go down there, buy some for us, that we may stay alive rather than die of hunger." So 10 of Joseph's brothers went down to buy an emergency supply of grain from Egypt. It was only Joseph's full brother, Benjamin, that Jacob did not send with the rest, for he thought that some disaster might befall them. Thus, since there was famine in the land of Canaan also, the sons of Israel were among those who came to procure rations. It was Joseph, as governor of the country, who dispensed the rations to all the people. When Joseph's brothers came and knelt down before him with their faces to the ground, he recognized them as soon as he saw them. But he concealed his own identity from them and spoke sternly to them. "Where do you come from?" he asked them. They answered, "From the land of Canaan, to procure food." When Joseph recognized his brothers, although they did not recognize him, he was reminded of the dreams he had about them. He said to them, "You are spies. You have come to see the nakedness of the land." "No, my lord," they replied. "On the contrary, your servants have come to procure food. All of us are sons of the same man. We are honest men. Your servants have never been spies." But he answered them, "Not so. You have come to see the nakedness of the land." "We, your servants," they said, "were 12 brothers, sons of a certain man in Canaan. But the youngest one is at present with our father, and the other one is gone." "It is just as I said," Joseph persisted. "You are spies. This is how you shall be tested, unless your youngest brother comes here. I swear by the life of Pharaoh that you shall not leave here. So send one of your number to get your brother, while the rest of you stay here under arrest. Thus shall your words be tested for their truth. If they are untrue, as Pharaoh lives, you are spies." With that, he locked them up in the guardhouse for 3 days. On the 3rd day, Joseph said to them, "Do this and you shall live, for I am a God-fearing man. If you have been honest, only one of your brothers need be confined in this prison, while the rest of you may go and take home provisions for your starving families. But you must come back to me with your youngest brother. Your words will thus be verified, and you will not die." To this they agreed. To one another, however, they said, "Alas, we are being punished because of our brother. We saw the anguish of his heart when he pleaded with us, yet we paid no heed. That is why this anguish has now come upon us." "Didn't I tell you," broke in Reuben, "not to do wrong to the boy Joseph? But you wouldn't listen. Now comes the reckoning for his blood." They did not know, of course, that Joseph understood what they said, since he spoke with them through an interpreter. But turning away from them, he wept. When he was able to speak to them again, he had Simeon take from them. When he was able to speak to them again, he had Simeon taken from them and bound before their eyes. Then Joseph gave orders to have their containers filled with grain, their money replaced in each one's sack, and provisions given them for their journey. After this had been done for them, they loaded their donkeys with the rations and departed. At the night encampment, when one of them opened the bag to give his donkey some fodder, he was surprised to see his money in the mouth of his bag. "My money has been returned," he cried out to his brothers. "Here it is in my bag." At that their hearts sank. Trembling, they asked one another, "What is this that God has done to us?" When they got back to their father Jacob in the land of Canaan, they told him all that had happened to them. "The man who is lord of the country," they said, "spoke to us sternly and put us in custody as if we were spying on the land. But we said to him, 'We are honest men. We've never been spies. There were 12 of us brothers, sons of the same father, but one is gone, and the youngest one is at present with our father in the land of Canaan.' Then the man who is lord of the country said to us, 'This is how I shall know if you are honest men. Leave one of your brothers with me, while the rest of you go home with rations for your starving families. When you come back to me with your youngest brother, and I know that you are honest men and not spies, I will restore your brother to you, and you may move about freely in the land.' When they were emptying their sacks, there in each one's sack was his money bag. At the sight of their money bags, they and their father were dismayed. Their father Jacob said to them, 'Must you take my childless? Must you make me childless? Joseph is gone, and Simeon is gone, and now you would take away Benjamin. Why must such things always happen to me?' Then Reuben told his father, 'Put him in my care. I will bring him back to you. You may kill my own 2 sons if I do not return him to you.' But Jacob replied, 'My son shall not go down with you. Now that his full brother is dead, he's the only one left. If some disaster should befall him on the journey that you must make, you would send my white head down to the netherworld in grief.' Now the famine in the land grew more severe. So when they had used up all the rations they had brought from Egypt, their father said to them, Go back, I can't say the word procure. Go back and procure us a little more food. But Judah replied, The man strictly warned us, You shall not appear in my presence unless your brother is with you. If you are willing to let our brother go with us, we will go down to procure food for you. But if you are not willing, we will not go down, because the man told us, You shall not appear in my presence unless your brother is with you. Israel demanded, Why did you bring this trouble on me by telling the man that you had another brother? They answered, The man kept asking about ourselves and our family. Is your father still living? Do you have another brother? We had to answer his questions. How could we have known that he would say, Bring your brother down here? Then Judah urged his father Israel, Let the boy go with me, that we may be off and on our way, if you and we and our children are to keep from starving to death. I myself will stand surety for him. You can hold me responsible for him. If I fail to bring him back, to set him in your presence, you can hold it against me forever. Had we not dilly-dallied, we could have been there and back twice by now. Their father Israel then told them, If it must be so, then do this. Put some of the land's best products in your baggage and take them down to the man as gifts. Some balm and honey, gum and resin and pistachios and almonds. Also take extra money along, for you must return the amount that was put back in the mouths of your bags. It may have been a mistake. Take your brother too, and be off on your way back to the man. May God Almighty dispose the man to be merciful toward you, so that he may let your brother go, as well as Benjamin. As for me, if I am to suffer bereavement, I shall suffer it. So the men got the gifts, took double the amount of money with them, and accompanied by Benjamin were on their way down the road to Egypt to present themselves to Joseph. When Joseph saw Benjamin with them, he told his head steward, Take these men into the house, have an animal slaughtered and prepared, for they are to dine with me at noon. Doing as Joseph had ordered, the steward conducted the men to Joseph's house, but on being led to his house, they became apprehensive. It must be, they thought, on account of the money put back in our bags the first time, that we are taken inside. They want to use it as a pretext to attack us and take our donkeys and seize us as slaves. So they went up to Joseph's head steward and talked to him at the entrance of the house. If you please, sir, they said, we came down here once before to procure food. But when we arrived at a night's encampment and opened our bags, there was each man's money in the mouth of his bag, our money in the full amount. We have now brought it back. We have brought other money to procure food with. We do not know who put the first money in our bags. Be at ease, he replied. You have no need to fear. Your God and the God of your father must have put treasures in your bags for you. As for your money, I received it. With that, he led Simeon out to them. The steward then brought the men inside Joseph's house. He gave them water to bathe their feet and got fodder for their donkeys. Then they set out their gifts to await Joseph's arrival at noon, for they had heard that they were to dine there. When Joseph came home, they presented him with the gifts they had brought inside, while they bowed down before him to the ground. After inquiring how they were, he asked them, And how is your aged father of whom you spoke? Is he still in good health? Your servant our father is thriving and still in good health, they said, as they bowed respectfully. When Joseph's eyes fell on his full brother Benjamin, he asked, Is this your youngest brother, of whom you told me? Then he said to him, May God be gracious to you, my boy. With that, Joseph had to hurry out, for he was so overcome with affection for his brother that he was on the verge of tears. He went into a private room and wept there. After washing his face, he reappeared, and now in control of himself gave the order, "Serve the meal." It was served separately to him, to the brothers, and to the Egyptians who partook of his board. Egyptians may not eat with Hebrews. That is abhorrent to them. When they were seated by his directions according to their age, from the oldest to the youngest, they looked at one another in amazement, and as portions were brought to them from Joseph's table, Benjamin's portion was 5 times as large as anyone else's. So they drank freely and made merry with him. Then Joseph gave his head steward these instructions: "Fill the men's bags with as much food as they can carry, and put each man's money in the mouth of his bag. In the mouth of the youngest one's bag, put also my silver goblet, together with the money for his rations." The steward carried out Joseph's instructions. At daybreak, the men and their donkeys were sent off. They had not gone far out of the city when Joseph said to his head steward, "Go at once after the men. When you overtake them, say to them, 'Why did you repay good with evil? Why did you steal the silver goblet from me? It is the very one from which my master drinks and which he uses for divination. What you have done is wrong.'" When the steward overtook them and repeated these words to them, they remonstrated with him. "How can my lord say such things? Far be it from your servants to do such a thing. We even brought back to you from the land of Canaan the money that we found in the mouths of our bags. Why then would we steal silver or gold from your master's house? If any one of your servants is found to have the goblet, he shall die. And as for the rest of us, we shall become my lord's slaves." But he replied, "Even though it ought to be as you propose, only the one who is found to have it shall become my slave, and the rest of you shall be exonerated." Then each of them eagerly lowered his bag to the ground and opened it. And when a search was made, starting with the oldest and ending with the youngest, the goblet turned up in Benjamin's bag. At this they tore their clothes. When each man had reloaded his donkey, they returned to the city. As Judah and his brothers re-entered Joseph's house, he was still there. So they flung themselves on the ground before him. "How could you do such a thing?" Joseph asked them. "You should have known that such a man as I could discover by divination what happened." Judah replied, "What can we say to my lord? How can we plead, or how can we prove our innocence? God has uncovered your servant's guilt. Here we are then, the slaves of my lord, the rest of us no less than the one in whose possession the goblet was found." "Far be it from me to act thus," said Joseph. "Only the one in whose possession the goblet was found shall become my slave. The rest of you may go back safe and sound to your father." Judah then stepped up and said to him, "I beg you, my lord, let your servant speak earnestly to my lord, and do not become angry with your servant, for you are the equal of Pharaoh. My lord asked your servants, 'Have you a father or another brother?' So he said to my lord, 'We have an aged father.' And we said to my lord, lost the line, sorry. My lord asked your servants, 'Have you a father or another brother?' So we said to my lord, 'We have an aged father and a young brother, the child of his old age. This one's full brother is dead, and since he is the only one by that mother who is left, my father dotes on him. And then you told your servants, Bring him down to me, that my eyes may look on him.' We replied to my lord, 'The boy cannot leave his father. His father would die if he were to leave him.' But you told your servants, 'Unless your youngest brother comes back with you, you shall not come into my presence again.' When we returned to your servant, our father, we reported to him the words of my lord. Later, our father told us to come back and buy some food for the family. So we reminded him, 'We cannot go down there. Only if our youngest brother is with us can we go. For we may not see the man if our youngest brother is not with us.' Then your servant, our father, said to us, As you know, my wife bore me 2 sons. One of them, however, disappeared, and I had to conclude that he must have been torn to pieces by wild beasts. I have not seen him since. If you now take this one away from me too, and some disaster befalls him, you will send my white head down to the nether world in grief. If then the boy is not with us when I go back to your servant, my father, whose very life is bound up with his, he will die as soon as he sees that the boy is missing, and your servants will thus send the white head of their father down to the nether world in grief. Besides, I, your servant, got the boy from his father by going surety for him, saying, if I fail to bring him back to you, Father, you can hold it against me forever. Let me, your servant, therefore, remain in place of the boy as the slave of my Lord, and let the boy go back with his brothers. How could I go back to my father if the boy were not with me? I could not bear to see the anguish that would overcome my father. Joseph could no longer control himself in the presence of all his attendants, so he cried out, have everyone withdraw from me. Thus no one else was about when he made himself known to his brothers. But his sobs were so loud that the Egyptians heard him, and so the news reached Pharaoh's palace. I am Joseph, he said to his brothers. Is my father still in good health? But his brothers could give him no answer, so dumbfounded were they at him. Come closer to me, he told his brothers. When they had done so, he said to him, I am your brother Joseph, whom you once sold into Egypt. But now do not be distressed, and do not reproach yourselves for having sold me here. It was really for the sake of saving lives that God sent me here ahead of you. For 2 years now the famine has been in the land, and for 5 more years tillage will yield no harvest. God therefore sent me on ahead of you to ensure for you a remnant on earth and to save your lives in an extraordinary deliverance. So it was not really you, but God who had me come here. And he has made me a father to Pharaoh, Lord of all his household, the ruler over the whole land of Egypt. Hurry back then to my father and tell him, thus says your son Joseph, God has made me Lord of all Egypt. Come to me without delay. You will settle in the region of Goshen, where you will be near to me, you and your children and grandchildren, your flocks and herds, and everything you own. Since 5 years of famine still lie ahead, I will provide for you there, so that you and your family and all that are yours may not suffer want. Surely you can see for yourselves, and Benjamin can see for himself, that it is I, Joseph, who am speaking to you. Tell my father all about my high position in Egypt and what you have seen. But hurry, and bring my father down here. Thereupon he flung himself on the neck of his brother Benjamin and Benjamin wept in his arms. Joseph then kissed all his brothers, crying over each of them, and only then were his brothers able to talk with him. When news reached Pharaoh's palace that Joseph's brothers had come, Pharaoh and his courtiers were pleased. So Pharaoh told Joseph, say to your brothers, this is what you shall do. Load up your animals and go without delay to the land of Canaan. There get your father and your families, and then come back here to me. I will assign you the best land in Egypt, where you will live off the fat of the land. Instruct them further. Do this. Take wagons from the land of Egypt for your children and your wives, and to transport your father on your way back here. Do not be concerned about your belongings, for the best in the whole land of Egypt shall be yours. The sons of Israel acted accordingly. Joseph gave them the wagons as Pharaoh had ordered, and he supplied them with provisions for the journey. He also gave to each of them fresh clothing, but to Benjamin he gave 300 shekels of silver and 5 sets of garments. Moreover, what he sent to his father was 10 jackasses loaded with the finest products of Egypt, and 10 jennies loaded with grain and bread and other provisions for his journey. As he sent his brothers on their way, he told them, let there be no recriminations on the way. So they left Egypt and made their way back to their father Jacob in the land of Canaan. when they told him, "Joseph is still alive. In fact, it is he who is ruler of all the land of Egypt." He was dumbfounded. He could not believe them. But when they recounted to him all that Joseph had told them, and when he saw the wagons that Joseph had sent for his But when they recounted to him all that Joseph had told them, and when he saw the wagons that Joseph had sent for his transport, the spirit of their father Jacob revived. "It is enough," said Israel. "My son Joseph is still alive. I must go and see him before I die." The end of chapter 45. Thanks for being with us.